Hi everyone, welcome back to another SimplePlanes video. In this video, I'm going to explain how it is possible to have almost infinite parts in a build by exporting the parts as a 3D model and adding them back as a mod. I'm also going to explain how the SWL-120 will use this method to vastly improve performance, and how I'm going to ensure no mods version will be available. So, let's get started. So what exactly do I mean by exporting then adding back in as a mod? Well, what I mean is, let's say we have a static body like this fuselage, nothing moving, just a bunch of parts that just are together. I export that using this function here, 3dprint/export, and then in Unity, I add those parts back into SimplePlanes, except it's a custom mod part. For example, let's have a look at the engines. For this engine here, I add it back in, except when I add it back in, it's actually a single part. For example, this is the engine N2 model. I did build this in SimplePlanes, and then exported it, and then I added it back in as a single part. And what I've been able to do is, instead of having this engine be like 2,000 parts, because this is 2,000 parts when I exported it, I instead have 4 parts. Well, there's a few other rotators and small label details, but instead of 2,000 parts, it's around 20 parts. We just have the engine base. We have the engine N1 model, which includes the fan and the N1 turbine and compressor. Then the N2 turbine and compressor here, as well as the reverse thrust bit, which slides back. So instead of 2,000 parts, I have 4 parts. There's a few other parts, of course, that I just mentioned, such as rotators to make this rotate, a piston to make the cowling slide back, and labels don't export correctly. But basically, it really improves performance by shifting the load from the CPU to the GPU. Because instead of the CPU having to run the physics scripts for all of these different parts, like every single blade here would have to be run individually, it can just process one script for a large 3D model. And because of the simplicity of SimplePlanes' models, like let's say this block, it's like nothing, I can effectively add unlimited parts to a build, and then when I export it, there'll be minimal GPU impact and almost no CPU impact. So if I'm making it so the SWL-120 will have a lot of mods, how will I make it available for a no mods version? What I'm going to do is I'm going to have 2 different versions. So let's say we have the wings, so that the SWL-120's wings are vanilla, so there's no mods at all. What I'm planning to do to improve performance for me is to export the wings and then add each moving static body, like let's say the inboard flap or the slats, as a part. So instead of 700 parts, I think it's more like a 1,000 parts for the entire wings, it's going to be something like 50. But what I'll do is I'll have 2 different versions, one with the original wings, which is what I've got here currently, and the other with the modded wings. Now, for the version with no mods, there will be a few less details in some areas, like the new engines are 2,000 parts alone, so there's no way I'll even be able to run them with all the details, but I'm going to lay the front fan on. So let's say we have the current mod engines. What I'll do is I'll remove the interior bit, so I'll move the N1 and the N2 turbines and compressors, but I'll leave the front fan on, because that's only 50 parts by itself. So let's say we have, where is it? So instead of having all this on the no mods version, I will just have the front fan. So this won't be here, but the front fan will be. Although, this isn't really visible anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. It just is there. Or another thing that will be included on the no mods version, this is not the right file, is on the interior, I have a custom 3D modeled part for the front. It's not built in-game, it's actually modeled in a different program. So this will be in the no mods version. But this isn't a core part of the plane, it's just an extra detail, so it won't be included. But if you look on the no mods version from the outside like this, you won't immediately notice any difference. There'll just be a slight performance impact, so there will be slightly worse performance because it doesn't have the optimized mod version, but it'll still be somewhat detailed compared to the mods version, and the cockpit will be the same because the cockpit does not really have mods. So now that I've explained how this works, I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's say you have a plane here, let's say this one, the SWL-120, and you want to export it and then add it back in as a mod to improve performance. So you want to improve performance on it somehow. And in this case I'm going to use the add it back in as a mod example. Obviously you don't actually need to export this one because it's a very small plane, it's only like, what, 100 parts. I'm just going to use it as an example. The first thing I want to do to it is remove any moving bits and any non-static parts. This would include things like the propeller, because that's a whole special part, has a lot of settings, it can move, so I'm going to get rid of that. Wheels are also not good for exporting because they are wheels, so not like a static model. They have their own properties and special things they can do, so we're going to get rid of those. I'm also going to get rid of all the wheels just to have the base fuselage, for an example. And the other things that you don't really want to export because they don't really work well is things like glass, because that can be exported but it doesn't really show up right because it's transparent. Wings as well, and really anything that's not just a basic model. So now we've done that, we have this. We also want to check it doesn't have too many paint types. This one only has white and the black for the, whether this is the front, the inlet or something. We can have up to 4 colors on an export. Well, actually it doesn't, on the it can have as many as you want, we just need to separate them because we can only add them back in with 4 different colors. So we have 2 colors here, I'm just going to use that. And then once you have this ready to export, I'm going to export it, go to the menu, and click on 3D print/export. That will show up on your desktop in here. Now before we can do anything with this, we want to set up a Unity project for modding. So we're going to open Unity. There's a specific version you have to use, it's Unity 2020 something, I'll put it up on screen. I'm going to create an empty project, and then we're going to import the SimplePlanes mod tools package. Now this can be found in the following directory, which I'll put up on screen, but as of now, those files don't actually work correctly, but there is one you can get off the SimplePlanes website, which is a working one, and I'll link that in the description. So we're going to import that, we're going to import everything, and then when this pops up, well at least it pops up for me, click yes. So now I have our empty project, and then we're going to click on the new SimplePlanes window, or the tab, I'm going to click on Mod Builder window, I'm going to drag that in here, I'm going to enter in some information, and then we're going to click on Start Creating Mod. And now I have these options. And something, if you're just installing Unity for the first time, I think you may have to install the macOS support. I think it will prompt you on how to do that. But I'm just assuming you have it installed already. So going to select those two and we can delete them, we don't actually need those. Optional, you can also rename this. You don't need to again, but I'm just going to do it because I like to. So now I have a Unity project ready for modding. We can then import the file I just exported. So you can either import it by clicking on Assets, Import New Asset, and it'll open up a window, or you can have File Explorer open, and then you can drag it in. So this is what the export looks like when you export to SimplePlanes. We don't need this texture, so we can delete that. And then we're going to drag out the OBJ file, object file, into the scene. So I have this here. Then we're going to right-click here, Prefab, Unpack Prefab, so I can actually edit with it. And then we can go ahead and delete things we don't actually need that we didn't delete. So things don't need to have that I forgot to delete are some other rotators, so we don't need that. So the hinge rotators. We don't need the cockpit part, so we can delete that. We can just go through and have a look at this. So this is exactly what we wanted. So now this is ready for the next step. We want to add a color to it. We're going to right click, create, going to go to material, and I'm just going to call this one white. And then you can play around with this a bit. All I need is just this. We can pick white, the other sliders, but that much maybe, I don't know. So now I have white. I'm also going to create another material which is going to be black. We can apply the materials to the different components of this mesh. Well, actually it's not the one mesh, it's a bunch of different meshes. We can either drag them to them in here, or we can drag them to it in the scene. We can also actually just select all, like this. So I can just drag it to them all at once. Now we could create a part and add it back in like this, which would show up as one part, but there's still a bit of an issue. If we leave all the meshes like this, which is what I call unjoined, there isn't much of a performance benefit, because it still has to, for some reason, calculate all of the meshes even though they're one part. So we want to join them, and this is where a program called Blender comes in. It can do many functions, like a lot, I have no idea what most of them are. I just use it to join meshes. So going to open Blender, we're going to create a new general file, we're going to delete all of this, we don't need that. Then we're going to import. Actually, we need to export from Unity first. So going to right click on this, and we also need to do another thing, which is to install a function which allows us to export to another format called FBX. So we're going to go to Window, Package Manager, and then we're going to search for Export. We're going to make sure it's Packages Unity Registry. I'm going to install this. And now I can click on our file, Export to FBX. We want to change this to binary export format. We don't need to change anything else. I'm just going to change its export location to be in, say, I like to create a new folder in the project called Other Elements, or something similar. I'm just going to do that here. We're going to export it into there. And then in Blender, we can go File, Import, FBX, New Unity Project, Other Elements, or Export. Then we have the file in Blender. It's now going to join all these meshes. One thing I'm going to note is there are some parts in here that are going to be moving in the final parts, like there's going to be separate parts, which is the flaps and the two ailerons. I never did the tail yet, so I'm just going to leave it, I'm just going to join it all. But just make sure if you're going to do the entire plane, make sure you have your moving parts in separate meshes. For every moving collection of parts, it's going to be another part. If that even makes sense. So I'm just going to select everything. I'm going to unselect this aileron, this flap. It's basically going to select everything and then unselect the bits that are not in the main fuselage. This isn't everything that's in the main fuselage and wings, but I'm just going to join this. So right click and click on join, and this is all one mesh. And then I'm just going to go down the list again. So that's the black one, the inlet. I'm going to leave that for later. These two bits here are not the flaps, they're the cover bits for the flaps. So I'm just going to add them to the main bit as well. So now all those are joined. I'm just going to rename the type of meshes just so they can be easily identified. This is the right aileron. That's the left aileron. I'm going to leave the inlet because we're going to join that soon. It's just the right flap, left flap. Those two are the inlet and main fuselage. So now we're going to join the two separate colors, the inlet and the fuselage. When we're doing this, we want to take careful consideration of what we want the trim to be. In SimplePlanes, there are 4 colors you can paint a part, which is primary and then trim 1 to 3. So let's say I want the inlet to be trim 1, because usually in SimplePlanes a part is primary is its most surface area, that's that color, and then trim 1 is the next biggest, and then so on. We're going to use primary and trim 1 because that's just how it works. We want the inlet to be trim 1 and the main fuselage to be primary. We're going to select the smallest surface area of paint. We're going to select the one we want to be the most advanced trim first. For example, we'll select trim 1 in this case first, which is this black coat. Then we're going to also select the main fuselage. If you're wondering how I'm selecting multiple parts, I'm holding down shift. So we've selected those two, then we're going to hit join. We can see here there are 2 colors, white and black, with the white one being at the top indicating that is the prioritized color of the mesh. We can't change this order, I'm not sure why, just as how it works. So we need to make sure we select the color we want to be I'm not sure how to explain it. But basically we want to select trim first before primary. I'm just going to rename this again to main fuselage. And that's all we're going to do in here. And then I'm going to export this. And I'm going to export it to FBX. I'm going to put it back in my other elements. And just give you an example of what it could look like. For the SWL-120 I have a lot of parts. And my other elements looks like this. For example, I put the Unity export in here. And the I don't have a Blender export, but I would put the Unity export that we just exported before in here, and then I'd also put the new one in here, for example in the engines, for the engine base. The Curling Full is the one that I exported from Unity, and then this one in here, Curling Full, is the one from Blender. It's just my system, you can create your own if you want. Basically I'm just going to export it to FBX. I'm going to leave it as untitled, not STL. I'm going to leave it as untitled because that's what the default is. So you can go ahead and delete that. I also don't need this anymore, so we can delete this too. And then I'm going to drag in the file I just exported from Blender, which is here. I find the materials that it comes with from when it's exported are different to the ones in Unity, so I'm just going to reapply them. So we just have the 2 parts So now we have the model ready to go, but we're going to create the parts too. Because if we exported this, there wouldn't even be any parts in the game. So we're going to go to SimplePlanes, Game Objects, Part. I'm just going to create a part here. I'm just going to quickly lower the model to be somewhere closer to the part. And also, when we're exporting from SimplePlanes, we don't have to do this, but I like to do it. Especially when I have multiple exports that we're going to do. I drag in, say, a block, an array. I just like let's say the front of the plane, and then I make it. I'm just going to quickly make the primary cockpit in here, and then I make it so I can nudge the entire plane or thing to be exported from this block. So you can see I can now nudge the entire plane, aside from those for some reason, but let's just ignore that for now. So I can nudge the entire plane from this block. I like to nudge this to 0, 0. It's just a personal preference though. It just makes it easier when I'm exporting things multiple times, because I know this block is at 0, 0, 0 for all the exports. And this block stays the same in relation to the rest of the plane. I didn't do that when I was exporting this, so it's not in the ideal position, but anyway. So I have this part, and I'm just going to nudge it forward a bit, just so it's roughly in the center of the plane. So I have a part. Over here we have a part script. I'm going to click Create New Part. Its name, this is not the name it shows up in SimplePlanes. I'm just going to show you one of the 120s, not that. I'm just going to show you one of the 120s parts. So for the engines, if I drag out the engine base, then the display name is the engine base, but its actual name is engine base with no space. So there's a difference between the display name and the name. And you can see here there's a category called Designer Info. Then we have display name, description, category icon, and part icon. So category icon is the icon here. It defaults to this drill or something. But let's say this is a custom category, which these three are, and they have their own icon. Description is pretty straightforward. For example, what is it? Like just custom description. I didn't bother to add an icon because it's only for the 120. An icon is just an icon. I'm just going to set the display name because that's something we do need to set. I'm just going to call it 170 fuselage. These can all be anything you want, really. I just want to give it a memorable name so I know what it is. Fuselage, which is what it is, fuselage. Then we're going to add things such as attach points and collider. It's going to go to game objects, section as components. I clearly have not actually made a new mod in a while. How do you add an attach point? Never mind, here we go. So go into the part and click add attach point. This will show up here, attach point. So you can rotate it, so I can do things like rotate it, scale it. Actually, I don't want to scale it. Change its position, and then for collider, which is important for actually interacting with the part, we are going to part. Actually, that's the Unity thing, so we're going to go to game object, 3D object, this component. It's been a while. I just copy and paste mine from the other mod. I thought that's how you do it. So create an empty object, then add component, box collider, and you can see here it shows the collider. For my part, since the specific for one thing, which is my airplane, I just put a collider in a suitable place where I can just drag the part. But you really want to make the collider somewhere relative to the actual mesh. What you can also do, actually I'm gonna try this while making this video, is you can add component, mesh collider, and you make sure you select the mesh you're gonna add it to. What it actually does is it makes a collider around the entire mesh, I think. We'll see how this runs. So I'm gonna actually get rid of this one. It's also a good idea to name all the different things. So this part's actually going to be the fuselage. Naming them doesn't actually do something in terms of functionality, but it just allows you to see what each thing is. So this is the fuselage, so I'm going to drag in the fuselage to here. So that's the fuselage. I'm just going to copy and paste this a few times so I have a part. So it's going to repeat this for all the other four meshes, which are the ailerons and flaps. And then we can go ahead and delete the fuselage mesh from each of these four parts. I'm just going to rename the attach points. I don't need to do this again, but I just like to. Then I can drag in all the meshes into the parts. So now I have our 5 parts. I can also rename them. We do need to do this, otherwise the mod builder will throw up an error message when it's trying to build the mod. So name, left aileron, display name. I'm just going to call it left aileron because I'm just trying to make a video. I'm not going to actually keep this. And the last thing we can do before I forget is add a part mesh configuration script here. This allows us to control painting the part. So default just means SimplePlanes will allow the user to paint the parts and custom with original colors, keeps the original materials as exported from Unity, and custom with theme colors. I can't remember what that does. I'm pretty sure it's like default but with something else. And another thing we want to do to make sure it doesn't mess up is, let's say we have primary then trim 1 to 3. In this case just have 2 materials. We want it to be 0 to as many as you have, so 0, 1, like this, or 0, 1, 2, or 0, 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure what this does in game, but it does something to make it work. The other thing I want to do, again I keep forgetting things, is select the asset, and then click Read Write Enabled. This allows the painting to actually work. So I'm just going to go ahead and add the part mesh configuration to the rest of the meshes. Now we can go ahead and save the scene objects. I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to click Save Scene Objects. And then we can go ahead and save the mod. By default, I think it will save in the SimplePlanes mod folder. Actually, it might not, but I find it easier to just save it in the mod folder, because that way, whenever you're frequently testing it, you can just save it into there every time you have to rebuild the mod. Make sure SimplePlanes is actually closed when you're doing this, otherwise it can't actually save the mod in here. And then once it's saved, we can go ahead and open SimplePlanes, see what happens. Make sure to enable the mod, and then since we didn't actually make a custom category, I'll just by default show up in Other. We have all parts here. And because we used a collider, the part mesh collider, or whatever it's called, to allow us to have a collider with every part of the mesh, we can just select any part of the mesh and drag it. Unlike this engine here, where there's a box collider around here somewhere. Because we exported it together, all the parts will have the same position when they're properly aligned. So I'm going to copy the position of the base fuselage, and I'm going to paste in that same position to all the other parts. And here we go. This is a total of 5 parts. I also need to show you how to paint it. So painting works pretty well. We can go ahead and select trim 1, then paint the inlet. And it looks exactly the same as the original SWL-120 fuselage. That's pretty good. This is exactly how I did, but with a little more steps. This is exactly how I did the SWL-120's engines. Well, at least the current version of them. I've gone through several versions of engines for this. I have all the different stages loaded up here. So I started with, where is it? I think it's this one. Yep, it is this one because it's taking forever to load. So this is the engines, but before I exported them. There were over 2,000 parts in this engine. The building process is a basic advanced engine, completely vanilla SimplePlanes. And then I just exported it, so instead of 2,000 parts, it was actually something like 4 parts. I wouldn't have actually made it this detailed if I didn't know I was going to add it as a mod, because 2,000 parts is enough for a build, let alone a single engine. But if I add parts as a mod, it allows me to have basically, theoretically, unlimited parts in a single airplane. So that is it for this video. In my next video, I'm going to be coding the function of this engine here. Currently, I'm just going to show you, currently it just spins up a bit when you activate group 2, but that's not the expected behavior. I want it to be started up realistically with these buttons here, and also the reverse thrust. This is actually more like 50 parts, because I can't really add these fuselages back into the mod because they're a single part already. There's just 24 of them. But this is 50 parts compared to 2,300 parts, so it's much better. But all it does is spin up when you activate a group, and then spin down when you deactivate it. That's nowhere near the function I want to do, so I'm going to code all that in my next video. So I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!